Hey, yo, this is your man, El Judge, man, and welcome to Weird Stuff Wednesday. Weird Stuff Wednesday is one of them days where we just talk about weird stuff. And let's get into this here. Now, today, man, we're going to talk about, man, something that happened quite a long time ago, man, about a mixture of blood that brought forth something that looks like this. What you're looking at right here, you're looking at the skull of Nefertiti without the crown on. Now, Nefertiti, she was known as the beautiful one. Why is she known as the beautiful one? Were there other women who were not more beautiful than Nefertiti? This is why they called her the beautiful one. They called her the beautiful one because she was the beautiful one of the mixture between her blood and the mixture of the Atlanteans, or the beings that were existing at that time on this physical plane right here. Now, look at the skull. Now, some people, they're going to sit back and they're going to argue, say like, well, that was an old African tradition where they would wrap the skull in twine and cloth to stretch the skull, to give them an elongated skull. And yes, that is a truth. I will not argue with you about that. But this right here is something different, because you can wrap the skull up all you want. Where's all this extra bone going to come from that created that elongated skull? Think about it. It's just like if you grab a balloon and you try to shape it like this here, eventually it's going to squeeze in so far and then there's going to be a bubble at the top. That bone came from somewhere. Where did that come from? And why would the African or other tribes of people, why would they do that? What was they trying to emulate? You know what they were trying to emulate? They were trying to emulate some new gods that came into their presence. Gods that had skulls that look like this. Now, what you're looking at right here, you're looking at the skull of a being that came from the constellation of Dracos. Listen to what I said. The constellation of Dracos. Draconians. Look at the skull. Shaped like a cone. Draconians. But here's the thing. This right here, when you were looking at Nefertiti, what you were looking at was a mutation. This skull right here, in itself, is still a mutation that led up to what you had with Nefertiti. Now, some people, some of my brothers and sisters, they're going to say that this is a Tiru. No, a Tiru has a whole nother different story. The inner earth beings. We'll talk about that at another Wednesday, or Weird Wednesday. But right now, we're going to talk about these Draconians. Some of these Draconians, when they originally came here, they had teeth like this here. Like that character that you saw on the movie Predator. And even in the movie Predator, it had a cone head as well. But nevertheless, these beings originally had that. And their teeth started to slowly mutate as they began to mix in with the beings that they encountered here. See, now the Draconians, they lived in their spot over there by the planet Risk. They had problems over in that area. But when they left there, the ones who survived, they ended up on Mars. And being that they have a disagreeable nature or a warring nature, they went to war with one another, and then they did something that depleted Mars' atmosphere. So then the ones that lived, they came to this place that we call Earth today. Now, when they came here, they encountered some beings who had just basically came out of a world catastrophe. But these beings, some of their elders lived, and many of them lived, so they created a new society. And within the new society that they built, the society, the technology that they came up with was, the technology that they used was crystalline technology, quartz. Now, if you've been around for as long as I have, remember what your parents told you about Atlantis. They told us originally because they thought Atlantis survived under the water. They said, but Atlantis had telephones, they had radios, and they had televisions just like we have today. That's what our parents, and you know, if you've been around for a while, that's what your parents told you about Atlantis. Now, Atlantis had crystalline technology, which gave them the ability to watch television. Just like when you watch that movie with Superman, he went to the cave in Antarctica, he put that crystal in, and he was able to watch on the screen his father telling him what to do. They had that very same technology back then for lights, communication, for traveling. They had that technology. But when these beings come, they had another technology. And they came with more powerful technology because they were more advanced in thought. They weren't like these doggone beings that you may call Atlanteans or Lemurians, because these beings, they still thought like children. They were running around like children with advanced technology. They sat at the feet of the elders and they loved. They had a system that functioned. But these dysfunctional beings, when they came into existence, they wanted to disrupt and corrupt their system. So they did in many different ways. But one of the things that the elders of the doggone Atlanteans or the Lemurians or the people from Mu, what they said was, they was like, you know what? You need to merge with us and become more like us so we can become more like one another. They were smart, because this is the same story that we have about us mixing our blood with reptilians because we was too agreeable. This goes to the story of the Riskians, but let's go to the stories of them. The doggone elders, they knew that they were too passive. They would just let beings run over them. But they knew if they mixed their blood with these people who had warring, if some of them mixed their blood with these beings who had a warring nature, they would have part of that fighting back within their spirit. And not only would they have part of that fighting back within their spirit, that meant that some of them would learn to become more human-like and become more compassionate toward their fellow individual. So it was just a change. We was trying to change them and they was trying to change us. But nevertheless, we mix. But this goes back to, this is why we have this individual known as the beautiful one. Because this was their path to perfection. It looked almost like the beautiful people who was here on this planet, but nevertheless, it still had part of the cone head. But nevertheless, like I said, it was beautiful. It was more acceptable. Now, here's the thing, because this was a long process. And like I said, you were dealing with beings who came out of a catastrophe. Now, when some of those beings, now Atlantis was something else. Now, the place that they call Egypt and the place that they call South America, they had pyramids and they had civilizations there. But some of these children-like beings, they came and they lived in those places where those old pyramids were. And some of them saw the pictures on the wall how pharaohs lived, and some of them, their ancestors passed stories about how pharaohs lived. So when they went to these places that were already empty, like Egypt, it was already empty. There was no one living there. Some of these newer beings, or the Nubians, some of these new beings, they went there and they just took over. And they started a system of order, and they became known as Egyptians today. But originally they was Nubians. And they was taking over and they was running that thing, and they had their own system set up, and they did the same thing in South America. But like I said, those beings that look like, those draconian beings that look like this, a lot of them was making deals with these people who had these advanced cities, these big cities like us in South America and in Egypt. They were making deals. They were like, you know what? Okay, we're going to give you technology and we're going to let you still be the king. But this is what we're going to do. In trade for you being the king and us giving you technology, you got to give us some of your women so that we can mate with them. And we could produce other beings who look like Nefertiti and more. So they created a system where it looked like they were sacrificing people, but they weren't really sacrificing the women and to them. They were taking their women and giving them to this. Sorry that this took 10 minutes. I'm going to have to finish this at a